Hello and welcome. I am Scrapperlock, and this is City of Heroes. We're with Liberty Lash. She's level 40 now. I did that off screen, and I did shoot a video of her at level 40, and I wasn't happy with it. It was very rambling. I got very distracted. I made a lot of dumb, weird mistakes, like going to the base instead of using the train when the train would have been faster, and I don't know. It wasn't a good episode, so I decided I'm not going to post it. We'll try again. So one of the first things we want to do is change Liberty Lash's costume to the Season 4 costume, and that is this one. And fireworks display to change the costume. And so there we are, and we'll do a little close-up of it. She now has this, there's no cape, we got a ponytail. All the colors are the same, but we have the same symbol on her chest, right? The star with the circles of stars around it, and then we have on the sleeves, instead of a bunch of little stars, we have one big star, sort of the shooting star, called Starshot. And then I did the little, what are these called, the sharp on the gloves and the boots. Not like super thrilled with how it looks on the gloves, but the thing is, if you don't put some sort of a white border, the dark blue clashes a bit with the red in this particular setup, and so I decided to do it that way. So I think she's looking pretty good. And I started doing we're not a story arc yet, but I started doing missions for Indigo, who sends you against the Malta. And yeah, I got beat. I got defeated by the first sapper I came to because I forgot all about the sappers, and he hit me like twice and drained my endurance, and all my toggles turned off, and they killed me. So now they want to reduce the number of Maltas in Paragon City. That looks like a street hunt mission, or we have a little something. It's kind of complicated, but because of that, it's really simple. Certain mutual friends of ours are quite upset. That's the Malta that their plans have been discovered, and there's an invitation to an ambush. So we are going to defeat all of the ambushers in Paris Park. And we are right now in Founders Falls. So let us head to the base, since it's right here, and we will base teleport to Paris Park. So yeah, I was blathering on about a video that I saw today, and I don't know. I feel like it was so disjointed between what I was saying, losing my train of thought, getting beat by the Malta, talking about the Malta, talking about the Mistreaks. I ended up on one mission that was just super long outdoor mission, and I just ignored the whole mission and just found the glowy and clicked it, which isn't very interesting to watch. So overall, I just decided this isn't a very good episode and decided to not upload it. So we'll be doing this one instead. I'm a little bit, I don't want to say out of practice, right? I've been playing City of Heroes for years. But until today, I haven't played for about a week. I've been playing more AO Tennis 2 and just doing other stuff, getting ready for my Deadlands game on Saturday, which is in a couple of days, since today's Thursday. And I've been kind of letting City of Heroes sit because I got so far ahead of my posting that I wanted to post and get closer. Because one of the problems is when I post something that I did weeks ago and people make comments about it, then I can't like expand on that if I want to like expand the discussion and talk about it more here on the video. Sometimes they give me an idea of something to talk about, and then it's weeks and weeks until I actually talk about it. So I don't. I wanted to try to get a little closer. Oh my gosh, these are the Knives of Artemis, who are incredibly dangerous and frustrating to fight. And this is a boss, so I think we're going to go and hit our special power, and we're going to try to take her out first. These are basically like stalkers almost. They do a lot of damage, they hit really hard, and they also do some really annoying secondary effects like throwing caltrops down and really slowing you down. So we might want to hit Hasten as well in case they do that. So this is a boss, so I wouldn't normally do this against, say, just minions and lieutenants, as frustrating as they may be. I think this whole entire mission, there's the caltrops, this whole entire mission is going to be against the knives. Oh no, there's some Malta up there. So operations engineer. So these two guys, either one of them can drop a what's it called, an auto turret. So we're going to try to hit them quickly. And taunt. He dropped it anyway. Yeah, there's just no way, if there's more than one of them, there's no way to stop them from getting it dropped. The auto turret's utterly irrelevant. It can't do any damage to me. Not in any appreciable way, right? The little bit of damage it's doing, I will regenerate faster than it can do the damage. I'll show you that after we finish this guy. So let's move over here. And yeah, he can shoot at me, right? So watch. You're not going to see my health bar move. I could stand here all day. That's why I hate these things, right? Because they can't actually do anything to you. They're just an annoyance. Now you do end up, it's better to just get rid of them just so they don't follow you around, because they will. But they're super annoying. They also have massive amounts of resistance to smashing and lethal, I think. One or both. And so it's like for half of the melee characters, they're going to resist you and take a lot of hits to take out. And I think they also con above their level, so it's like you're doing less damage total to them because they're higher conning. It's like fighting a lieutenant almost, which is super annoying given that they're just auto turrets. Oh, this guy, and I was too late. See, I tried to get in here without them seeing me, and you just can't. So the one thing I definitely do is I ignore them. At least until I've defeated everybody else in the room, and then I'll fight them, because again, they can't do anything to me. So one of the reasons I have a little extra endurance is just for the sappers. If they hit you, sometimes you can avoid having your toggles drop by sucking down some endurance. But yeah, if they hit you, what happens is not only do they drain your endurance, but they stop your endurance from regenning. And if you don't realize that you've been hit, and you have too many moves queued up and you use too much endurance, then you just drain it down, all your toggles drop, then you get mez, then you die. Which is what happened to me. There's an operations engineer. Okay. Usually the taunt will stop them from the knee, when they take a knee, just like the Sky Raiders. If you listen, I don't know if you can hear it because I keep the sound softer on the recordings than I hear, but there's a little bit of sound of ice, and you can see some frost coming off my character, so he's got some ice bullets and some fire bullets. The ice bullets slow you down, the fire bullets do a damage over time. So you can see here, no, this. Oh, it went away. I was trying to click on it, but it's minus speed. It slows you down. So defeat all ambushers. So everybody in here needs to be taken out. No shortcuts. So yeah, I think his name is Super Geek Mike or something like that. Did a really cool video today on breaking the game, and like the question that he asked, and it's not an inane one, it's actually one that is asked frequently, and I've talked about breaking the game. He asked, is it possible for players to break the game? And one line of thinking is, no, it is not possible to break the game, because whatever happens is what happened in the game. We've kind of talked about this in terms of dice, right? Can the dice roll ruin the story? And I said, no, the dice can't ruin the story, because the story is what happens at the table, not what you thought was going to happen. And so a lot of people also take this position that just like the dice can't ruin the game, nothing the players do can ruin the game, because what the players do is the story, right? There's the scenario the GM made up, but then there's whatever the players do that is the actual story of the scenario of the adventure, right? And I'm hitting all of them so they don't take a knee. They might still, but usually what happens is after you damage them, they don't. And so he said, in a certain sense, no, because if the players do a thing and that's the story that happened at your table, then that's the story. You can't break that story. But breaking the game isn't only about breaking the story. So he talked about sort of three senses in which you could describe breaking the game. The first and most obvious sense is mechanically breaking the game, right? That is to say, having your character do stuff mechanically in the game, such as executing a power in champions, like extra dimensional teleport, extra dimensional movement, my favorite whipping boy, or doing something in D&D, like this one friend of mine was saying in, it's not D&D, but a basic fantasy. Apparently, because the sleep spell is so kind of weak in standard Dungeons and Dragons, they made it more powerful in basic fantasy. And what he said was he feels like it's too powerful, and so his character, all he has is read magic, write magic, and sleep. It's his only spells. Because he said, "Yeah, I've thrown sleep in like 3 battles in a row now, and it basically is an I win button. Everything at that level pretty much fall, like, half, 3/4 of them fall asleep, and then the battle is too easy." And I said to him, "Well, what are you doing it for? Like, if you know that it's broken, what are you doing?" He said, "Well, it's the only spell I've got. What am I going to do? Cast read magic at them?" And he said, "The only other thing a character has is some darts to throw, and I don't have that many darts, so eventually I'll run out." And then he has a dagger, and I can't. I have 1 hit point. He said, I think he said you roll the D4, right, or maybe it's 3 hit points. But he said, like, as you level up, the magic users only get 1 hit point per level. They don't roll the die anymore, right? Whereas fighters will get 3 or 4 per level, or what have you. Maybe you get your con bonus per level, and he only has a +1, right? So he's only going to get. He said I got 3 hit points, and in like 5 levels I'll have 8 hit points. I can't really get in there with a dagger, So anyway, however, it is true that mechanically that sleep spell could potentially break the game if it turns every battle into an I win button, right? Every battle becomes easier because there's 10 kobolds, which would give your party of 5 a challenge, but 4 of them fall asleep, and then 5 against 6 kobolds, and you crush them. And so it's possible to get a mechanical I win button, something mechanical that breaks the game. It breaks the mechanics of the game, right? The combat, the the uber power build combos that you read about online that are essentially breaking the game mechanically, so that the balance doesn't, that the publishers originally intended and that the game master expects to be there, isn't really there because you found some loophole, some way around it, right? A great example of mechanically breaking the game would be the guy who figured out Sapper, let's get him fast. He got me. So we've got him stunned a little bit. There we go. Alright, so these bosses do a lot of damage. But we should have them okay because we can stun. But let's go ahead and engage all of our... Wow. Let's go ahead and engage all of our buffs. Man, so this guy's a +2 boss, so that's why he's doing so much damage. Oh, I forgot to show you how we enhance, so we'll do that too. But let me finish my thought on mechanics. Right, so the burn tanker, on the day of launch, getting to level 40, that's mechanically breaking the game. Right, you're doing something you're not supposed to do with the mechanics of the game. He broke the game and caused it to be ruined for everybody else. So, Super Geek Mike said, "Yep, no disputing that. That kind of thing is breaking the game." But then he said there are a couple other ways you can, quote unquote, break the game, and sort of the other 2 ways. One of them is often a complaint of game masters, where the game master complains not that you've actually broken the game, but what you've done is you have ruined the story that they intended for you to play. And so, I'm Paris Park again. And so that, the example he gave, I think Brennan Lee Mulligan, who's an internet GM, told the story of the very first adventure he ever ran. He bought this like 200-page, like the Hall of the Dwarven King or something like that. And Mulligan, he then played a clip of Mulligan. He was being interviewed, and he said that, I guess in the story that had been designed by the game designers, the player characters attend a wedding of a dwarven princess who's being fixed up with a dwarven count or something, and she doesn't actually want to marry this guy. But, it's an arranged marriage, and royalty often does this. And so what's supposed to happen is you're at the wedding, and the wedding gets like invaded by bad guys, and the player characters fight the bad guys, and they find some clues, and then they're going to chase the bad guys. And the wedding of this princess, who's somewhat unwilling but grudgingly doing what her father wants, the wedding of this princess to the count is just a sidebar, right? It's just the scenario. It's just sort of the reason why you're in the room to see the invasion happen so that you can get involved in the actual story. That's the 200-page adventure. But somehow the player characters, one of the player characters had the ability, like empathy or something, and read the mind or the mood or whatever of the princess, and they realized the princess didn't actually really love this man and didn't want to marry him. Sapper goes first. All right, I'm going to throw on a luck so that he's less likely to hit me. And then we're going to try to hit him as fast as we can. Man, they always get you no matter what. All of my toggles turned off. This is so frustrating. Yeah, I can't move, so I didn't kill the sapper fast enough. Yeah, and all my toggles are off, so... So I think what I need to do is actually, when I can, engage this strength of will before we fight the sappers, just so that if the toggles turn off, at least that is protecting me. Because that'll protect you against Mez, too. That's how I died the last time, right? I got hit by the sapper. And this time, it wasn't me being distracted. I just went in as fast as I could, and like, you miss, and you're dead. And it's hard. +2 against these guys is rough. It's not so bad when you're like a stalker, because you can sneak in and bam, but as a brute, it's rough. And unlike Quintessence Lass, who every time she hits a stalker, or sorry, a sapper, makes him less likely to hit back because of debuffing, this character is not debuffing anybody. She's just dizzying them. If it works on the first hit, maybe, but unfortunately, if you don't dizzy them on the first hit, you can't guarantee it. If you do, they're going to hit you with that endurance drain. So anyway, so the players in Mulligan's game, this is years ago, he said it was the first time he ran a published adventure. And like, by the way, he said he prepped for it for weeks. He had drawn out the maps and on tracing paper. I'm not sure why he did that, but it had something to do with the gameplay and the way they were running the game. And so he was all ready to go for this, and the players found out that the princess didn't really want to marry this guy. And they were like, you know, being modern players, right, because arranged marriages were standard in the times that we're usually simulating when we play D&D, but are unusual now, and the idea of a person being forced to marry someone they don't want to marry is not cool today, even though it was normal back in medieval times, which is what D&D is simulating, in a sense, right? The players were like, well, screw that. We're not going to let her get married to a guy she hates. So they actually kidnapped her from the wedding and took her out of there. And then the whole campaign became about them fleeing from her parents and getting her to the man she loved and stuff like this. And none of what was written in the adventure actually happened. Who's attacking me? And so... So that was just an example of how, all right, was that breaking the game? Well, in the sense that the players played what they wanted to play and had their characters do what they wanted their characters to do, no, it wasn't breaking the game. He said, you know, the GM shouldn't be so married to the story that they aren't willing to go in the directions the players find interesting to go in. And I don't completely disagree with that, although I'm going to have some more to say on that as we continue. And then, so he said that's not really breaking the game, right? Just because you didn't do what it says they expect the players to do in the written adventure doesn't mean you've broken the game. And that's true, right? My players often don't do what it says. Often, the guys who write these adventures write, unfortunately, they write one thing, they expect you to do it, And then the players are like, well, why are we doing that? Right? There's really no answer except that that's what it's written in the adventure. Let me give you a great example of Blood Drive, and the more I think about it, the worse I think this adventure is. Um, there's a scene that actually the scene where two characters died, right? There's a sense in which the players could actually have complained that this was a railroad and that they died because it was a railroad, and they'd be right. There's a haunted bridge, and the two different railroads were fighting over the bridge, the Iron Dragon Railroad and the Wasatch Rail, and their armies died, and the ghosts are still fighting the battle. And so the players are trying to cross the river with the herd that they're driving, and they get to this spot, and they're scouting ahead, and they see it, and they realize, based on occult rolls and stuff, that the ghosts are anchored to the world by the bridge, because it's the thing they're fighting over. And if they just destroy the bridge, the ghosts will be gone, and then they can cross the river with the cattle. But as somebody asked, if we blow up the bridge, are we going to be unable to cross? No, you can still cross without the bridge. So then what the player said was, well, okay, if we can cross without the bridge, why do we even need to cross here? Why don't we go a couple miles up the river where there are no ghosts, cross, and then come back and just leave the bridge the way it is and nobody gets hurt? Right? And actually, I didn't have an answer for them because the book doesn't have an answer. It just says they have to cross here. So what I said was, this is the ford in the river, right? It's the lowest point. It's where the cattle need to cross. But that was just me on the fly coming up with a reason, because they were like, why do we even want to cross here? Right? And I was like, well, they're kind of supposed to cross here. And the reality was that if they didn't have that fight, they were going to get to the end, to like the town they were supposed to get to. And I'll be honest, I wasn't quite ready for them to get there yet because they hadn't fleshed everything out. It's in the module, right? But I always go in and edit and change and muck with things. And the Horror at Headstone Hill, which is a much better campaign, by the way, better book. I've got a spreadsheet right now, a Google sheet, where I'm going through each town and I'm writing out on the Google sheet the name, occupation, personality, the secrets, alliances, etc. of every single named NPC in every single town and in every shop in Headstone Hill. Right now, I'm nowhere near done with that, and I won't be done by the time we play on Saturday. I don't think they're going to get to Headstone Hill. I think they're going to fight a malfunctioning infernal bartender. That's a Savage Tale. It's supposed to come in later, but I think I'm just going to play it now because they're in the town where that's happening. Notice how we're 41%. We can't hit it all. Miss. And then on the way, I have a random encounter with a Ringdocus, which is like a weird, weird creature, and they might encounter a couple other things before they even get to Headstone Hill, and that gives me 2 weeks. I'm getting into finals time in my semester, and so I'm pretty busy. It gives me 2 weeks to work on and keep developing and making the spreadsheet for Headstone Hill, which has like probably 100 NPCs, which is why I'm making a giant spreadsheet, right? So yes, this stuff is all written in the book, and I could run it if I have to, but I always do my own tweaking, modifying, taking notes, etc. And so I wasn't 100% ready for them to get to the town in Blood Drive, and I had assumed that they were going to fight this battle, right? And so I kind of, in a way, needed them to fight the battle. Now, on the other hand, they didn't seem like they didn't want to do it. It was a dramatic task. They like dramatic tasks, right? It's not like they were all like, oh, we hate this, right? But the adventure, like the writer, it never occurred to the writer that these guys might want to try to find a way around the bridge. They just said, the writer's just saying the only thing they can do, the only way forward, is for them to destroy the bridge, because otherwise the cattle can't get across. They're not going to go past the ghosts, right? And it never occurred to them, well, you could go around, right? They didn't set the terrain up so that it was impossible to go around. Put it in a canyon. There was a canyon battle before that against devil bats. Well, there we had no choice. They were stuck in a river with the rock walls going up 20 or 30 or 50 feet on either side, and the cattle were stuck in the river. They had to fight that battle. right? But they didn't have to fight the battle on the bridge. And so this is the way a lot of these written modules are, right? And if the players decide they want to go around and, you can let them go around and okay, it's fine. It's not the end of the world, and you don't have to force the characters to do anything. No, I didn't force them. They said, "Can we go around?" I said, "Well, this is a good place to ford the river." They still could have tried to go around. I wouldn't have stopped that, right? But they said, well, let's try it. They wanted to see what they could make of the ghosts, right? I mean, my players are smart, and they're smart enough to recognize that this is the challenge that the writer of the module has set for them, and they want to see if they can beat the challenge. And that's fine. But it wasn't breaking the game for them to want to go around. And I guess a lot of game masters seem to be implying that you're breaking the game by wanting to go around. It's not. So he just said that, just because they want to go a different way than you planned or do a different thing than you sketched out in your outline doesn't mean they're breaking the game. And that's true. I agree with that. But then he said, of course, there's a way that you can break the game, right? And that's when you are doing something that's ruining the game experience for the other players. So one of the examples he gave was a situation where two of the players in his group decided to start PvPing with each other, and the GM stopped it and said, "No, you're not PvPing. We don't do that in this group." Right? Now, he said the way the GM handled it, he maybe could have handled it a different way. But he said, still, right, the GM, by stopping that, wasn't enforcing a pre-written story. He was enforcing, sort of a table rule, which is that we don't do PvP here, and that if they had started it, they could have broken the game in the sense that we're now no longer playing in the style of play that we all agreed we want, right? And so that's sort of, to me, the most important, significant, and dangerous way to break the game is when players are doing stuff that's destroying the fun of the other players. That's the real breaking of the game, right? Because you don't get to do that. You don't get to destroy somebody's fun. Is she a boss? Oh, she is. Okay, so let's go ahead and buff up. We'll take out the minions first, and then we'll take the boss. Man, they do a lot of damage. Yeah, one of the problems with the willpower set is the lack of defense. And I've gotten most of my really powerful characters. I mean, Regen has a bunch of self-heals, which is really useful. And my other characters, they have all been, generally have a lot of defense. Even Invulnerability has a lot of defense. Ninjutsu has a lot of defense, which I've played before, and then of course Super Reflexes and Energy Aura. And so I'm not used to just getting hit this much. And the resistances just aren't good enough without that strength of will running to keep you safe against all of that incoming damage when you're being hit so much. Anyway, one of the things that I wanted to talk about having to do with players ruining the fun of each other, right? Ruining each other's fun, that he didn't talk about, is actually something that's super important. Right? And this is going to be kind of in two parts. One is to remember that the game master is a player, right? So when you say, if the players think something is fun, you should do it, well, the GM gets to have fun too, right? And what people often will say with something like a prepared module, or when you've prepped, so the GM's story, and the GM loses his prep time. But as Super Geek Mike said, and I'm not sure he really thought about what he was saying here, but he said, yes, I realize it's a bummer as a GM to, buy this module and prep it and spend all this time on it, and then you don't get to actually play it. But kind of, yeah, but you still need to kind of go the way your players, the players want. But the GM's a player too. And the thing is, it's no fun as a GM to be bummed out about the fact that you can't play this adventure. And it's not just the prep time, right? Let's think about what happened, what Brennan Lee Mulligan probably did all those years ago, right? You're in the game store or the bookstore or wherever you're looking at modules. Now you're perusing on the website. But back then, you're in the bookstore, you're in the game store. You see a series of books of modules in front of you. They have titles and covers. And you have the choice of, say, 10 different adventures that all would suit the level range of your party. And you pull out the books, and you look at the cover art, and you look at the titles, and you flip to the back page or wherever the publisher's blurb is, the few paragraphs, 2 paragraphs describing what this adventure or this campaign will be like. And out of the 10, you put most of them back, and you're holding 2 or 3 in your hand that you feel, from the publisher's blurb and the cover art and the title and the basic premise, look the most interesting. And then you flip inside. You look at the art and the maps inside. You skim the stat blocks of the monsters in the back. And after doing all of that perusal for 15 or 20 minutes in the bookstore, you've chosen out of that list of 10 books the book whose story and art and title and premise and publisher's blurb have inspired you as a GM. They've excited you. This is cool. I want to run this game. This looks so awesome, right? So if the players then, at the start of the adventure, turn aside and don't want to play it, right, don't do it, well, it's not just taking away the planning of the GM. It's also ruining the fun, right? Because the GM chose the adventure that inspired him or her, and now you're not allowing the GM to do the thing that inspires them. Well, players get to do what inspires them, but so do game masters, right? And it's very disheartening for a GM to get all excited about playing the Rime of the Frost Maiden or Night Train from Deadlands or the Curse of Strahd from D&D or Rise of the Rune Lords from the Adventure Path from Pathfinder, or the Mass of Nyarlathotep from Call of Cthulhu. You know, like, damn, Mass of Nyarlathotep, the box set costs over $100. I think it was maybe 200. I don't know, 150, $200. It's got multiple books. It's got all these player handouts, right? Now, I bought it because it was on sale. I think I got it for 25% off. I bought it because I knew it wasn't going to be available forever. I bought it because I want to someday play it, and I just want to have it so that I can play it. It's supposed to be one of the best campaigns ever written for any game, not just Call of Cthulhu. And so I was excited to get it. And if I ever get a chance to play it, I will be super happy, right? But imagine we're playing Call of Cthulhu, and I buy this thing, and we start the first part of the campaign where you're supposed to do something in New York, and the player's like, yeah, we don't want to go there, right? Well, that just cost me $100. And on top of that, you've said no to this thing that really excites me, your GM, that inspires me, right? That's ruining my fun. And costing me money, by the way, right? It's not just about whether the GM spent prep time. Often, time is the least of the problems. Look at this, 38% and constant missing, right? Yes, I realize I should miss 2 out of 3, but 3 or 4 in a row, and it's all the time. I think they're debuffing me with the cuts. I'm not sure. Yeah, they're debuffing my defense. So that's part of the reason you get hit all the time, because they're debuffing your defense. Look at that. And the amount of debuffing they do is literally insane. There's our last kidnapped victim. So one of the things is there is a very definite sense in which one of the players is the GM, and the GM gets to have fun too. And it's not cool to say, I'm going to actively try to avoid the parts of the adventure that were written by the campaign writers because that, you know, I want to go do my own thing. That's a potential issue. But there's something much more significant than that. And that is the nature of players at most tables. In most groups, gosh, we still don't have do a 60-minute mission, but we still don't have the story arc from her yet. How far are we on her bars? I guess up here we'll get the story arc. It's funny how some of them give you the story arc immediately and some of them don't. Whoops, I didn't mean to do that. I wonder if that has to do with level, right? Like that as you get closer. I feel like the closer I get to the next level range, right? Like you're at level 35 to 39. The closer you get to level 39, the faster they give you the story arcs. Maybe it's just luck. I don't know. Anyway, the really important thing, and this is something nobody has mentioned, but it's actually very, very important, and it's happened in every game group I've ever been in, is that there are different personalities to the players playing, obviously true, but there are sort of a couple different kinds of players. And in every game group, there's always a small number, usually a minority of the players, sometimes just one. That's what I call the alpha, right? And by that I mean it's the leader type person. It's usually an extrovert or the most extroverted member of the group. It's somebody who takes charge. When the players don't know what to do, it's the person who says, let's do this. Often they're one of the GM's favorite, if not the favorite player, because they get the group moving when the group gets stuck into analysis paralysis and stuff. They push forward, and that often pushes the story, the scenario forward for you. They're often the GM's best friend because they keep the story moving, right? These people, however, will very strongly direct the way that the party is going, right? And then there are other players, sometimes the majority, who are the beta players, if you want to call it that, or I don't know, gamma, whatever you want to call it. They're more followers, right? They kind of go along to get along kind of thing, and they'll just sort of do what the group wants to do. They just sort of go along with each other, and they don't really push things along, but they also won't object when things are happening that they're not thrilled with. They just kind of let it happen. And so what I think you have to be careful of is it's often the case that, shall we say, the alpha, the big mouth, right? The person who's the more overbearing individual, who's more extroverted, who's more of a leadery type, will be the one who says, I want to go off-road, I want to go rogue and not do what the scenario says, and the other players just go along with it. Now here's the problem. The other players might want to do the written scenario, and they're not saying anything because they want to get along, right? But they're actually disappointed that you guys went rogue and took the princess out of the Dwarven King's Hall and then did this whole other adventure because they wanted to see this adventure that you're playing, right? I wanted to play Curse of Strahd. I heard it's a really good game. I heard it's one of the best written modules, right? I have it on my bucket list of, and if I'm going to play 5e, I would love to try Curse of Strahd because I've heard it's really, really good. If it's a good module, why wouldn't I want to play it roughly as written? That doesn't mean I want to be straitjacketed or railroaded. I hear a glowy over here. It's probably on the other, over here, on the other wall, like on the other side of the wall. I'm not saying I want to be railroaded or straitjacketed, but I kind of want to do the campaign where you're supposed to be fighting against Strahd and ultimately defeat him rather than say, oh, let's work for him. And do something totally off the wall and completely unpredicted by the writers of the adventure, right? Then I'm not playing the adventure that I thought I was going to get to play, right? Or imagine Blood Drive, right? The beginning of Blood Drive in Deadlands, the player characters are asked, as written, are asked by Bill Sutter, who owns the herd, to help him move the herd from Texas to Wyoming. And that's pretty much all it gives you. Just like, I'm going to pay you to do this. And they're just doing it for money, right? And I made it a little different so that they would have more investment in it. But that's pretty much how it is written, right? And so Sutter asks them to do the herd, and you're supposed to go from Texas to Wyoming. Let's imagine that the alpha player, right? The person in the group who's the pushier one, the more extroverted one, the more vocal one, the one more likely to take on a leadery type of a role. Let's imagine that player. Um, let's imagine that player is not interested, even though he said he was, in Blood Drive, and decides he wants to try something different. And so he says, "Oh, instead, what I want to do is I want to be a cattle rustler and a horse thief and steal the horses and the cattle and go across the border to Mexico and sell them, right? And I don't want to work for this guy, and I don't want to take the herd to Wyoming, right? Now, the beta players will probably go along with it. They don't want to ruin his fun. They recognize he's going to enjoy this more. He maybe makes a really great case of how much more fun it would be, right? And they might go along with it and say it's fine. And if you ask them, they'll say, yeah, it's fine, I have no problem. But deep down, what they're thinking is, but I wanted to play Blood Drive. It sounded like a cool adventure, and I wanted to go on this drive from Texas to Wyoming, and see what was going to happen. And by becoming rustlers and staying in Texas and going back and forth across the Mexico border, we're not going to see any of the adventures that would have taken place. We go past, look at the trail, it goes past Roswell, New Mexico, where weird stuff is going to happen, right? It goes through Denver, it goes into the Sioux Nations, and we could go and meet them, and there's this really weird, cool thing happening there where technology doesn't work in the Sioux Nations. We could go find out why that is. All of these exciting things never get to happen because you decided to go off-road and stay in Texas and do the cattle rustling, right? And so almost every time in every game group I've ever had, when I've been the player and the alpha player has decided, because I'm never the alpha player usually, has decided to go rogue, right? To go off-road, off the beaten path and do something completely out of left field that doesn't have anything to do with this module, I'm sitting there unhappy because I wanted to play the actual module, right? I read the back of the module too, and it sounded cool, and we all agreed to play it, and now you're taking us somewhere else, right? And so you have to be very careful about this because it's, we talk about, the players want to do X, but the players are not one mind, right? They don't have a single mind. They often have different minds. And oftentimes they want to do different things. And it's not usually the case. In fact, I would argue it is almost never the case when you're going off-road and getting away from the premise of the module you all said you wanted to play, like Curse of Strahd or Storm King's Thunder or Rise of the Rune Lords, right? When you go clearly off-road away from the main story, there's almost always going to be at least one player who's not happy, because they wanted to play that story. I want to see what happens in Rise of the Rune Lords. And now because you refused to take the obvious direction that this adventure is setting us up to take, I don't get to do it. Right? There are lots of players who are like this, right? Where what they do is they feel like they never want to take the obvious path, because, quote-unquote, it's a trap, right? And so they always want to go the way they are, you can tell how the module writer expected you to do something, and they want to go a different way. Because they're thinking like video gamers, and they want to beat the adventure, right? But going a different way takes you off the path of how the story was written. And yes, we're generating a story at the table, and yes, you have the emergent story and all of that. I'm not saying that's not true, but in a broad brush sense, if we're supposed to be fighting goblins and saving the Dwarven Kingdom from the goblins, and instead of doing that, we have taken the Dwarven princess out of the Dwarven Kingdoms, and we're running across the land with her to Safe Haven, which is a completely different premise. We're now not just not being railroaded, we've gone completely away from the original premise that I just might have wanted to play. And you stopped me from playing it. And so I would say you just have to be careful, and this is where the GM has to be careful, right? Because yes, you want as a group, the players, to be happy with what's going on and to be able to move the story in directions that inspire them too. But you have to be careful not to have that you don't have the leader players, the alpha players. There may be one, like in a group of 5, there may be 2 of them who end up pushing the group in one direction or another. And you have to just be very careful as a GM that they're not pushing the group in a direction that you and some of the other players don't want to go. Everybody gets to have fun, not just the people with the big mouths and the pushy personalities. And you have to be very careful with this, or the pushier, more vocal players will just talk about railroading. They will railroad everybody into playing what they want to play. And they don't get to do that, right? We all have to do it together. It's a collaboration, right? But part of that collaboration is the decision of what adventure you're going to play. Now, if the GM just starts the module, doesn't tell you what the module is, keeps it blind, I just pull the box Rise of the Runelords off my shelf, open it up, and we start playing the first scene in Pathfinder for Savage Worlds, and my players have no idea we're on that adventure path. That's a different story, right? But if I say to them, guys, we're going to play all the Pathfinder adventure paths with different campaigns over the years. And the first one is Rise of the Runelords, and it's an award-winning game. And I read them the blurb on the back of the box, right, that tells you what the adventure is about, right? The Rise of the Runelords adventure path takes players on an epic journey through the land of Varisia as they advance from novice to legendary rank. As the tale unfolds, they must track a cult of serial killers, fight depraved backwoods ogres, stop an advancing army of stone giants, delve deep into the ancient dungeons to reclaim weapons of unbelievable power, and finally go up against an all-powerful wizard king in his ancient mountaintop city. Epic adventure awaits in the land of Varisia. And you guys start in the town where the goblins invade. And after the goblin invasion, you go, wow, this seems like Varisia is pretty dangerous. Let's get in a boat. This is a port city. And let's go to another kingdom so we don't get involved in this. That is breaking the game. Because I just read that out to the group last week, and everybody said, cool, let's play it. And now the alpha player goes, nah. That's breaking the game. That's not just following what the players want to do. That's pushing the group in a direction. Unless every other player also says this, and the GM says, okay, I don't mind that I just spent, let me check the price here, I don't mind that I just spent $99.99 on this box of stuff that I now can't use, right? I mean, I'm out $100. I'm out the excitement of wanting to play this, and I guarantee you, if you're in a group of, say, 5, at least one other player at the table who isn't saying anything is sitting there grinding their teeth and disappointed because that paragraph I just read sounded super exciting to them, and they wanted to do all of those things. And unless you allow a little bit of railroading, then you're not going to track a cult of serial killers. You're not going to fight depraved backwoods ogres because you didn't go into the backwoods. You're not going to stop the advancing army of stone giants because you said we're going to get out of town. You're not going to delve deep into the ancient dungeons or reclaim weapons of unbelievable power because you said we're afraid of the dark and we don't want to go down there. And you're not going to fight the all-powerful wizard king in his ancient mountaintop city, right? Those things sound exciting to this player. And by going off-road and rejecting the obvious stuff that the premise of this adventure is getting you to do, you're disappointing not only the game master, but that other player, or maybe 2 or 3 other players. And you have the 2 alpha players yanking everybody away from Varisia off into the ocean to become pirates, and it might be a fun adventure. But it's disappointing the people who said, but I always heard Rise of the Runelords was so good. And I have friends who played it in Pathfinder. And now that we're playing Pathfinder for Savage Worlds, because we all play Savage Worlds and we finally get to do this, you're going to take us somewhere else. I'm not happy with that. And the thing is, a lot of them aren't going to say anything. They're just going to sit there and take it. I mean, I tell you from, as I say, I can tell you from personal experience because I'm usually the player sitting there grinding his teeth, unhappy with the fact that we're not doing, what the adventure is supposed to be about. Do we have to do within each scene exactly what the writers of the module expected us to do? No. But if we said we wanted to play Rise of the Rune Lords, I want to play Rise of the Rune Lords. Right? I actually had an opportunity to do this right here in my town. There's a gaming shop, and the gaming shop, somebody on the Pinnacle. I'll talk about this and then we'll end the session. But on the Pinnacle forum before they shut it down, this was like a year and a half ago. I have the Rise of the Rune Lords. I skimmed the very beginning of it. I read the opening scene and said, this is way too much like the opening scene of my campaign. And when I read the little blurb about what this is about, I was like, this is so similar, actually, to the campaign that I just ran in D&D. I wouldn't want to run it again. So I put it away and said, maybe I can play it. I've read so little of it, and there's no real spoilers. And I honestly don't remember most of what I read. I did on purpose. I didn't try to, like, own it. So I look on the Pinnacle forums, and in the looking for games section, right here in my town, in a 20 minutes away, there's a game shop. I've been there once or twice to pick up some stuff. I don't know if they made it through the pandemic. I think they did. And it was like 2 years ago, I think. It was right after I got this set. Somebody made a post to the Savage Worlds forum that said, I'm in this town. They're in my hometown, and I don't remember what nights, on Friday nights or whatever, in this store, I'm going to be running Pathfinder for Savage Worlds Rise of the Rune Lords. If you're interested, come. I'll teach you how to play the game and teach you how to make up characters and stuff. And unfortunately, I saw this like 7 or 8 weeks after they posted, so I don't know if it was too late. And it was at a point in my life where I was going to be going out of town. I think it was like right before the summer, and I was like, I don't want to join this group and then tell the guy I can't be here for the next several weeks. It might have been 22 when my mother was dying, and I knew she was going to pass away, and I knew I was going to be away for a lot of the summer, because they basically told us around Memorial Day that she probably wouldn't make it to Labor Day. And so I knew that I was going to be back and forth, didn't know how much, didn't know for how long. And I didn't want to join a group and then be like, yeah, I'm going to flake out on you until Labor Day, you know? So I didn't really investigate it. But I was super interested in that, because I wanted to play Rise of the Rune Lords, because I've heard it's a really good adventure path, which is, by the way, why I bought it. It just was, the basic premise was too similar to what I had unwittingly done in my Rome game. The overarching storyline and the opening scene were so similar, I was like, my players are going to get deja vu, and I don't want to do this right after. You know, maybe in 5 years we could do it and they won't remember, but I don't want to go from one campaign like this right into another one that's the same basic premise. But I'd love to play it. And I wouldn't mind running it someday. But I'd love to play in it. I've never read Mass of Nyarlathotep because I want to play it. Here's a great one, Horror on the Orient Express. I would like to play it. I've never read it. I bought it because I'm afraid they're going to run out. And they're going to say it's out of print. So I bought it when it was on sale, and I have it. It's 2 hardcover books. The premise of Horror on the Orient Express is your characters get on the Orient Express, travel from the beginning to the end of the line, and they experience a bunch of horrors on the Express. And the obvious thing to do would be to get off the train, right? This is a literal railroad. But if the players in the middle of the adventure decided we're going to get off the train as a player on that adventure, I would be mad, because I signed up to play Horror on the Orient Express. Why would I get off the train? That's the whole point of this adventure, and I want to play that adventure. It's supposed to be really good. And so this is what I mean. You have to be very careful, because as a player, I'm pretty quiet and I'm liable not to say anything. But I'm going to be miserable if at the second stop everybody says we're going to get off the train and go do something else. And the GM has just got to sit there and allow it. And now he's paid $129 for these 2 hardcover books. And I'm all excited to play it, and he's all excited to play it, and you and the other alpha said, we're getting off. I'd be pretty unhappy. The GM might be unhappy. And now you're making 2 people at the table unhappy. And maybe more. There may be other beta, quote-unquote, players at the table who also don't like it. So you have to be very careful about this. And that's why it's important to communicate And it's important as a GM to communicate with your players individually, because oftentimes the quiet players won't say anything in the session, but they might say something to you one-on-one. And that happened to me, right? Whereas the newest girl in our group, she's very quiet. We talk on the phone frequently. And talking on the phone with her, I know what she likes and doesn't like, but she doesn't say it very much to the other players. And so every once in a while, when they're making their decisions, I will turn to her and say, "New girl, what do you think about this?" And then she'll say, "Well, actually, I'd prefer not." Right? So, for example, I know she's extremely opposed to starting new characters at high level. She wants to start at level 1. Now, she couldn't do that in our last, the last character she made, because her character died at seasoned, and so we brought her in at seasoned rank, and she was okay with that. But she doesn't like starting campaigns at 3rd level or 4th level or whatever. My best friend does like to do that. And so the two of them are sort of at odds. But early on, like, he now knows that she feels this way, and he thinks she's being ridiculous. I actually agree with her, and I have defended her to him and said I agree with her. But then he just says, "Well, you're being ridiculous," right? But early on, I knew she felt this way, but she hadn't told anybody else. And so I turned to her and said, "What do you think?" And she said, "I'd rather start at 1st level." And then one of the other players said, "Well, I actually prefer it too, because like in D&D, levels 1 to 3 are sort of like a tutorial where you learn your character and then you pick your subclass after you've kind of gone through the tutorial levels. And so it's sort of like a video game tutorial." And he said, "Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily like to skip the tutorials in video games either." And so my best friend got outvoted, because 3 of us said all of the beta players said we would rather play starting at 1st level, and he had to cave. And we even said to him, "Well, you can start your character at 3rd level and just not gain XP, and we'll start at 1st level. We don't mind." And he's like, "No, no, 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 we're not doing that. I don't want to be more powerful than everybody. If you guys all want to be 1st level, okay." But this is the thing, right? A lot of times, my best friend is more the alpha player. He's more vocal. He's more of a leader type. And that's great. And like I said, you need players like that. He's really good for pushing the story forward. He picks up on plot threads really well, and he follows them really well. You can't do without players like that. But you have to be careful not to let them steamroll over everybody else. So, yes, the GM needs to be responsive to player desires, but just keep in mind the players aren't all one, and the GM is a player, and everybody together gets to decide what the story is, not just one person. And breaking the game happens when one person takes the story in a direction the other people don't like and ruins the fun for everybody else. And that's what you have to be careful of. Let's stop there. Until next time, guys, I am Scrapperlock, and this has been City of Heroes.